Welcome to our Excellence in GIS webinar series through URISA this afternoon. The series has two purposes: to celebrate and educate URISA's Exemplary Systems and Government Awards. And this afternoon, we have the pleasure of celebrating the very high standards that go along with these ESIG awards by hearing from the winner of the 2022 ESIG Enterprise Systems Exemplary Systems Award. The speaker for today's webinar is Nehrbas, and she is the Senior GIS Manager for Sussex County, Delaware. Megan has been in the field for 20 years and has had the privilege of growing Sussex County's GIS program from a one-person shop to an award-winning team of innovators with 4 different divisions. Megan oversees the Land Records Division, handling parcel boundaries and property transfers, the 911-centric GIS team handling all things emergency management and dispatch, the utility GIS team supporting water, sewer, electric, and stormwater, along with field applications. And finally, the GIS administrative team handling the GIS and IT side with programming and custom application needs, such as the innovative program being shared today. So I think that this talk will last perhaps about 30 minutes with time for questions, which could come in the form of chat during the visit or at the end. And it'll be fairly informal, but we so appreciate Megan and her work group for sharing their hard work with us. And then we'll have a few comments at the end. So you can go ahead, Megan. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So thank you for the introduction. Today, I would like to share Sussex County. It's a dual solution with a state agency. And I think that's one of the reasons that it stood out as exemplary for the URISA award, because it was a multi-agency communication gap that we were using our GIS dashboard to fill that gap. So I'm going to go a little bit through the process of how this project came about, and then what our solutions were to make this work for all of the teams. There we go. So a little bit of background about the organizations that were involved in this project. There's a little bit of a kind of inherent issue with the way that Delaware handles land use and transportation planning. So Sussex County, all of the 3 counties are responsible for land use and managing development. However, a state agency handles planning, building, and maintaining transportation infrastructure. So there's sort of an inherent disconnect with having 2 different agencies sort of maintaining these things that need to be in concert in order to have successful growth in any community. So what was happening was there was just not appropriate communication going back and forth between the teams. And this is no fault of either team. They were doing the best that they could with the technology, tools, and resources that they had available to them. So the very first meeting that I was called into, we were just trying to identify what is the true gap that we're trying to fill here. So to give you a little example of what we were seeing, there's always a little bit of finger pointing in any kind of situation like this. There's, folks are a little bit nervous because their administrators are coming in saying, we have a problem, this is not going correctly, and who needs to change what. So basically the first type of gap that we identified was on the left-hand side there, you'll see the phasing notes that are highlighted, and those are DelDOT's phasing notes. And then only a couple of inches to the left of that is the Sussex County Planning and Zoning approved stamp. So it was pretty reasonable for both teams to be saying, well, you did know about our phasing notes because you signed off right next to it. However, the approval from Sussex County was really more based on, are the setbacks appropriate? Is there enough open space? And they were approving those items. They weren't reading the fine print of DelDOT's phasing notes. And this one in particular is saying that they're prior to the issuance of the 100th building permit, a certain amount of construction on roadway improvements needs to happen. So the real issue behind this is DelDOT was creating requirements that were actually for the county to issue. So if the county didn't know what the thresholds were, and then we didn't have a very easy way to send those numbers of permits having been issued back, it's pretty understandable why this kind of spiraled out of control the way that it did. And booming growth in Sussex County. So it was very difficult to try to stay on top of all of these different projects, all of the different thresholds, and all of the different permits that were flying off the shelf at the permit counter. So what we knew we needed to do was figure out a couple of key indicators. Where are these developer agreements? What parcels are involved in the developer agreements? How many permits have been issued in each of these? And then what is that threshold that needs to be capped? The second type of agreement over here on the right was the actual written letter agreements between DelDOT and whatever developer was building that particular project. And it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but one of the first questions asked was, okay, well, these aren't recorded, so who at the county gets a copy of this? And believe it or not, no one at the county was seeing this type of agreement. So our administrator had commented that we had hundreds of years of experience in the room and no one had ever seen one of these letter agreements before. So there were definitely some major gaps in communication and making sure that the group that was administering these agreements also looped in the group that was administering the permitting, because the two needed to be connected and combined. So understanding the challenges, the next thing that we did in Sussex GIO, we knew what we needed. We knew what layers we needed. We knew that we were going to require a permit layer that placed the permit points geographically so that we could say how many permits were issued in a certain area. And then we knew that we were going to require a polygon layer of the DelDOT agreement areas so that we would be able to do a point and polygon lookup of summarizing within the polygon, how many do I have? And then we would also need whatever those given thresholds were. If it's 100, if it's 5, how many permits are we kind of pushing up against in order to create those percent completes? So we created of dummy layers. We created very relatively little effort. We didn't get into workflow changes. We just built a dashboard with fake data so that we could get the two administrators to sign off on, yes, you can get the people in the room. Yes, you're allowed to modify workflows. So I cannot understate how important this step is, because when we got in the room with all of the different groups, we had the authority of that administrator. We had the ability to say, yes, we have Todd and Nicole's approval, who are the two administrators of these two different organizations, to say that, yes, you're going to gather this information for this effort. Yes, you're going to need to start creating this GIS layer, etc. So now the hard work, the roundtable discussions with each of the groups. Again, folks kind of had their armor on a little bit because they didn't think that they were doing anything wrong, and really they weren't. They were doing the best that they could, but we needed to have the information in order to try to make some progress. So we wanted to make it fun, and we brought pizza and snacks and chocolate bars, and we just tried to have a good time to kind of get people's shoulders down so that they would understand that we're a neutral party. And that's one of the things that's really nice about GIS projects. Typically, we don't have a dog in the fight. We are just finding ways to inject technology to make people's jobs easier. So we made it very, very clear. No one has done anything wrong. Nobody's in trouble. Just talk us through what you do now. And if there's any way that we can make that easier for you with technology, that's what we're here to try to do. So we tried to have a good time. And we asked DelDOT to bring us some answers to the table. So basic questions. How many agreements are there in Sussex County? Where are they located? How many permits can be issued in each of these areas? And believe it or not, these questions were really not easily answered. When we first said, how many are there? They were very flustered and said there could be hundreds. We have no idea. Sussex County is booming. There's so much growth that we can't possibly know how many. Okay, well, we need you to figure that out because there's no way for us to quantify how big is the problem if we don't know how many agreement areas we have. So we gave them some homework with that. Where are they? Not only do you have to tell us how many there are, we need to know where in the community these are so that we can start getting a geographic sense of how many projects and where they're located so we can kind of try to streamline our efforts. They had 2 field staff that were driving around physically to each of these projects and then going and trying to count the footers so that they could try to figure out how many permits have been issued because the county didn't have a great way to provide that information back to them. And some of that was because it was a tabular, it's a very tabular system, and there's some entry issues, data entry issues, as we all are familiar with. You might, if there's a community called The Pines, you might get somebody that writes Pines, somebody that writes The Pines, somebody that writes Pines, comma, the. So being able to pull all of them to give that true number was a real challenge on the county side. So both teams had a lot of challenges to be able to come up with what should be a relatively simple question. How many do we have? Where are they? How many permits have we issued? It should have been simple, but it was much more challenging than you might think. So this is when we knew that we needed to have that geographic layer of the agreement areas. So once we had DelDOT kind of collate all of their spreadsheets, all of their paper products, everything that would provide that information of the where and the thresholds, then we knew we had to bring in a second state agency, which was the Department of Technology and Information, and specifically their location intelligence team. So we had to bring on the GIS support of the state. We knew that at Sussex County, we could help support and guide the effort, but we were going to need support from the actual IT of the state in order to give the DelDOT folks the editing access, the ability to get into their GIS portal, to be able to create this data, and also their support to publish the hosted feature service that was going to be used to add all of this data into a geographic layer. They were wonderful. They sat around the table all together so that as we worked through it, if we needed to add another field, then we could do that. If we needed to add domains, we were doing those on the fly around the table as we added this spreadsheet information in. So DelDOT knew what they needed to do. We trained them in one couple-hour session. They knew how to draw their polygons in, and they knew how to get their information added. So with that, they were off and running, and they were getting to work adding their probably 100 different communities that they were trying to maintain with only 2 folks driving around the county. And we have a very large county. So even though Delaware is a small state, Sussex County is a pretty large county. So this was quite a bit of travel for these guys as well. So while DelDOT was off and running, creating their polygon layer, we knew that at the county, we had some work to do as well. So we use Tyler Technologies Munis product for our permit issuance. And with new permits, a lot of the time there is not location information because it's being built brand new and we might need to issue that address after. So we figured out that we could use the tax ID number, which is up in the top there. And then we were going to just create the centroid off of the tax ID in order to place the points. So they're not perfect in their location, but it is relative within the agreement area so that we can get those counts. One of the other things that was very important with all of this is we knew that it needed to be relatively real-time information. So what we ended up doing was we created a linked server. Munis is actually also in a SQL format, but this can be done by doing a link server with Oracle as well. We do have one of those established for our ownership information, but just for folks using different systems, this can be done with both SQL or Oracle to create those views that are necessary to be able to pull that data. We have this query run once every 15 minutes. So that is how quick the real-time data is occurring out of the permitting software. And then there is a SQL job that runs and pulls all of the specific fields that we're looking for and helps make sure that the tax ID is in the right format to be able to link that to our parcel geometries. So this step was pretty tricky to get sorted out, but now it just runs on its own and it runs every 15 minutes. So then the next interesting thing was we were able to get all of the permit points, but we were getting every single permit point in all of the county. So if you think about what you might pull a permit for, you're pulling a permit for a swimming pool, you're pulling a permit for a fence, you're pulling a permit for a deck. Well, DelDOT's not concerned about those things in regards to a transportation agreement. They're only concerned about the type of permits that will create a trip or several trips. So if you're in a commercial situation where maybe you have a new grocery store, you're going to create an awful lot of trips as compared to a clubhouse within a residence that is already the same number of trips that the residential will bring in. It's just the pool house for the residents of the area. So we had to go back and forth a fair amount with our permit technicians and with the DelDOT folks to make sure that when we're saying a building permit, what are we really referring to? Because the language in the agreements did not specify, and to the county, they were all building permits. So this is the filtering that is on the layer, and we actually just identified a couple of additional exclusions just last week. So this is ongoing and a living, breathing project that as new things are identified, we are still revisiting and making adjustments as necessary. So our next step was, how are we going to share this and make sure that, you know, what needs to stay locked down stays locked down, what is edited and needs to be controlled is controlled, and then what can be public, sure, we'll push it out there and we'll make it public. So what we did was a portal-to-portal collaboration. So as you can see where it says that little partnered symbol on there, this made it really easy, particularly in the testing window where we weren't ready for anything to be public and we were still tweaking things and making sure that the numbers that we were providing were appropriate, because the last thing we wanted to do was cause panic and everything turns bright red, that everything is over allocated and have the community in a panic. So we used portal-to-portal collaboration to keep it locked down while we did all of our testing. It is now a fully public-facing application, which is really wonderful because it provides opportunity for all of our partners in the development community to look at where they stand before even coming to the permit counter. So there's no argument necessary. You look at it before you come in, and then you don't waste a trip, and you know what you need to have done. So as far as maintenance for this project, there is the Delaware Department of Technology and Information. They have a script that runs every 15 minutes right after ours, so that it will populate it runs that point and polygon, and it'll populate the attribute with that figure. You can run when we were first testing it, you can run the summarize within tool, but there wasn't really a way in Portal to automate that. So DTI helped us out and created a script that ran that every 15 minutes. And then the only work that they have to do is troubleshoot if that script fails for some reason. And then on the Sussex County side, we also have our SQL job that runs with the linked servers. So if for some reason that fails, we know that we have to look into that and figure out why why it's not pulling the new permit information. But it's all automated, and it's very rare that we have any trouble with either of these scripts. So other than that, there's really zero maintenance other than if there are any identified changes or adjustments. So the example of the change that was made recently is there was some permit that was, I think it's called a finishing permit. And what that essentially did was duplicate the same permit number twice. So then it was looking like that number was higher than it really was. So we're going to create an exclusion to take those out of the numbers so that then we're not turning people away and denying them for a permit that they could otherwise get. So there are still some tweaks here and there, but it's pretty minimal. That's just adjusting the filters. So our motto in GIO is we always want to create relatively maintenance-free items because we are not the subject matter experts. We are the folks trying to create solutions. So we need to leave that work to the subject matter experts, and we just try to create ways to make their lives a little bit easier. So we're always in perpetual discovery, and then we deliver, and then we revisit as needed based on the workflows of the teams using it. So some of my favorite things about this project are the unforeseen benefits that occurred. So certificate of occupancy. So they did have in the agreement language, there were thresholds for building permits, and then some of them contain thresholds for certificates of occupancy. And what ended up happening in one project in particular, the folks that had purchased their homes in this community, the county was holding the COs because DelDOT was requiring that, but you're really just looking at some poor family that bought their home, paid for their home, and now they can't move in because the developer did not meet whatever their requirement was as far as making sure that it was safe to enter and exit the community. So you're really holding the feet to the fire of the wrong party. So what came out of this is they can still use certificates of occupancy thresholds in an agreement, but only in a commercial project. So if, say, you're building a Wawa or a Royal Farms or something like that, you can get your permit and you can build, but you may not open for business until you've met whatever the requirements are. That way we're not putting our regular constituents in a position that's unfair when it's out of their control. And then another piece that was added was the inclusion of planning areas. So areas that maybe are still in the works as far as creating developer agreements, but it gives Sussex County permit techs a fair warning that don't issue anything here because there's ongoing work that DelDOT is working on. Even though we don't have an actual threshold, we know that there's ongoing work, so we need to not do anything until they give us the go-ahead. And then another piece that was really nice was our utility permitting is a completely separate permitting body. However, what we were ending up having happen is they'd go upstairs, they'd get their utility permit and then walk downstairs and be denied for their building permit. So creating consistency between the different departments, they all use this same dashboard now, and they also included in the utility notice to proceed, they included language about the DelDOT thresholds and ensuring the agreement compliance for that prior to coming in for utility permits. So it just created continuity across all of the different groups, and there was no, well, they let me, why won't you kind of commentary. We just made it so everybody was a unified front. And then there's still some ongoing discussions about commercial properties and phased developments and some mixed use developments. Those sort of provide an interesting challenge because the permits may all be pulled on the same mother parcel, but they sort of have different rules within their agreement. So we've been looking into some creative ways to try to answer those issues. Nothing that makes the overall dashboard any less valuable, but just little ways that we might be able to make it better in the future. So we're still looking into some of those things. So now I have just a quick animation of sort of navigating through the site, and so you can see how it all kind of came together to close the gap. So any developer agreement that DelDOT may have added, you can also see the permit points that are within the community sitting on each parcel. We used some arcade scripting to make the pop-up a little more useful, so you can see the percent completion or percent allocation for both COs and permits. You can use the widgets to determine what type of permit, how many have been issued in each of the areas. There are attachments that DelDOT have added in, so you can see the rhyme to the reason and the method to the madness for why those thresholds are what they are, which is very helpful to be able to share that information with our customers. And it just gives an overall sense of all of the projects throughout the county at any given time. And that's helpful administratively. It's helpful agency to agency. And it's also helpful just for the community at large to be able to see what ongoing work is happening within their community. And then our developers, they can, a lot of times they'll send a permit runner and they'll expect to get however many permits they want when they send that runner. And this helps with that communication. Check this before you come in. You're only eligible for 7, only ask for 7. And then there's a lot less miscommunication between those groups. So that is about the extent of what the project was. There are some ongoing benefits as well that were realized through this. We're working on also sharing the permitting information through Delaware has a kind of an interesting program. It's called the Tax Ditch program, and it has to do with water drainage, but that permit information is very important to share with it's the Department of Resources and Natural Control, and they need to know where all those permits are to make sure that there's no building happening within those areas that they need to keep clear for water drainage. So it's been interesting to have other agencies that are also showing interest in trying to get this information so that we can be more clear with communication from the county to multiple state agencies.
Megan, you're amazing. Your team's amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have
definitely my team. I just didn't talk about it.
Yeah, this is inspiring in so many ways. We do have a couple questions. I wanted to say though first that I don't think I introduced myself earlier. I'm Rachel. I'm on the Exemplary Systems and Government Review Committee, as is Megan. So often what happens is when groups win this award every year, we then ask the award winners who have a very high standard to join us on the review committee, and we do this every year. And we've just announced the 2023 winners. I believe there's a link to that in the recent URISA newsletter, as well as on URISA's website. So be watching for that. But Megan's team was the Enterprise System 2022 Exemplary Award System winner. And so it just sort of keeps giving back because we have people like Megan and her group then improve the process and then spread the word. So we really want to make sure that all of you folks that are on this call today, if you want to know more about the Exemplary Systems and Government Award process, please, we can paste this into our chat. The website contains all of the information about the history of the awards and past winners, and it's a very, very high standard, as Megan has demonstrated today. So check it out, and if you have questions, you can always reach out to URISA staff. But Megan, this was just very inspiring, the collaboration, I think, especially. One of the questions, Tim wants to comment that he thinks it's awesome you all have a pizza budget, and he's wondering if you use Energov with, is it Munis?
Yeah, Munis.
Munis?
So actually, we also collaborated on snacks. I brought the pizza and DelDOT brought the chocolate. So we made sure that everyone contributed. So we are not at this time using Energov. We have explored that, but it was not a fit at this time, both fiscally and there are some other probably offline, if there are folks using Energov, that there's a group of folks that are GIS folks with Energov. We have a team chat that we all talk in. So if there's anyone out there that is using EnerGov, I'm still in it because I know that it's a potential for Sussex County, but there's about 6 or 7 folks that are actively in using EnerGov in one way or the other in implementation, in full use, things like that. So that group of GIS professionals might be a good group for you if you are interested in having kind of more specific EnerGov conversations.
Yeah, another question. How was it to work with the state? I also have the same question.
So both easy and hard, right? Some things were very easy. We had a tendency to try to really do the proof of concept before asking a lot from them, because we know that the GIS office in the state is pulled in 100 different directions at any given time because they're supporting so many groups. So we tried to make it relatively easy. We would sort of create the tool or create the filter or create whatever it was that needed to happen. We had our own version on our portal, and then we had the one that was shared. So we kind of had our playground that we would do everything that we wanted implemented to then try to make it easier for the state to say, here, we know this works. Please give us a change order that only takes you an hour so that we can then have it in the real system. As far as getting them to play along with creating the layers and adding the users in the portals and things like that, again, I'll go back to that administrative championing, because it wasn't Megan from Sussex County saying you need to add this user. It was the secretary of the Department of Transportation saying, Megan has my authority to request that you add this user, so you need to do it. So I cannot tell you enough how much the championing helped, because it just wasn't even an argument. It was, you know, I'm here on Nicole's authority. We're not going to ask you to do anything that doesn't make sense, but we need to know what the processes are. And then we have the authority to say, this makes sense. We need to implement it. And it's Nicole telling you that you need to create this GIS layer. So the championing is huge, and going into anything, you have to make sure that you have kind of that power behind you before going in. So
Thank you. Do you feel like the administrative folks and the technicians and the folks meeting the public and answering the questions have bought into this, and they have the power to add the new polygons in a timely fashion or keep things up to date?
Yeah, actually, the folks at DelDOT love it, because the amount of time that they spent driving around and then not knowing and being unsure, and then the very next day, the numbers that they had just spent all day driving around were already wrong again. And just being able to have that instant, well, every 15 minutes, pretty close to instant communication back and forth. And it's really helped the relationship of the DelDOT team and the permit counter team, because so many times those communications led to the developer, the customer calling and fussing at this one, and then saying, well, it's the county that issues the permit, and then they're calling and fussing at that one. And so that it just removed all of that, where now they can have a good working relationship because they know they're on the same page. They know they're trying to do the same thing for the betterment of the community. And there's not really any finger pointing anymore. It's just, we all have the data, we're all on the same page, and we're all going to support what's there.
Excellent. What advice, Megan, would you give someone who's watching this webinar who maybe is working on a really exciting, cool project, and they're wondering whether or not they should consider applying for the Exemplary Systems in Government ESIG award? What prompted you to actually take the leap to complete the application and do that?
Well, actually, this project I just knew was special with the collaboration that occurred. And that's almost what led me to SIG, is I said, I need these teams to get something out of this. They worked so hard and this is so cool, and I want them to be recognized. And that's how I stumbled upon the ESIG, was just wanting the teams that had done this to get recognition for their work, because it was a big deal. And so I applied on their behalf so that they would get that recognition. And it's been wonderful for all of them. And they loved being interviewed and part of the process of applying. And it just made all of the teams look good. So the administrators were thrilled with it. The staff that worked on it were thrilled with it. So yeah, if you know, there's a lot of things that appreciation will get you further than a paycheck sometimes. So just making the folks who work so hard understand how important and how special their work is can really go a long way. So sometimes it's just about showing them that they did a good job.
So inspiring. Thank you. Again, the eSig page, past award winners. Did you know that this has been a thing since 1980? So what are we at? 43 years? Many of you on this call are not 43 years old, but this has a long, splendid, excellent history. So Megan's group is just one of the next generation. So that is really the celebration. This is the final of the 2022 award winner webinars today. We do have other excellent URISA webinars coming up soon that are available on the education website. I think some of them include Next Gen 911. I think a few of them include public speaking. And of course, the GIS Pro 2023 conference is coming up in October in Columbus, Ohio. And the Leadership Academy is going to be in Denver, Colorado in November. So many things to learn and share and learn, just grow together. That's what yours is about. I don't see any other questions, comments. Oh, Tim Nolan, Lean Coffee and Networking event tomorrow night. Tim, do you want to put a link to that in the chat or say something?
Yes, I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, it's tomorrow. It's on the Connect. It's in the URISA portal under Connect. It's in the community calendar, and it's a Lean Coffee meeting. And Rachel, I know you know about that a little bit. So if you're curious, come check it out, and I'll post the link so you can register. I just got to find it first.
Sounds great. All right, anyone else on the call want to raise their hand, speak up, have a comment, something to promote? Otherwise, we'll let you get back to your busy lives and keep on doing great work. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and have a good Monday. Thanks, bye.